Hi there, it's Annalise again and welcome to the Week 3 video for English 201 Computing in the Humanities, Metadata, Markup, and Discoverability. In this video, the focus will be on how metadata and markup shapes our digital lives and how it is essential for the discoverability and therefore viability of digital humanities projects. First off, let's start with a simple definition of metadata, a word you may or may not have encountered before this class. So, metadata is data about data. You may be thinking, well, now what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at an example to get a better picture of what metadata is. So here is a photo of a cat. I'm sure all of you have taken probably a similar photo of a cat, a dog, or something else in the past. Well, the photo itself is the data. It's the content of this digital object. When we take a photo on a smartphone, it also typically stores metadata, so information about the photo. This information here includes technical specifics, so what type of camera was used, the size of the file, and the exposure, but it also contains information about the author, the file name, and if geolocation's turned on, the exact location where the photo was taken. This information is why you may have seen your photos automatically be organized in your photo folder on your phone due to date or location. It's because of this metadata which is stored on your phone for every photo. While metadata is typically discussed in terms of the digital, metadata isn't necessarily only a digital phenomenon. In fact, one of the origins of how metadata is applied to online text and resources is based on library card catalogs and archival file description. So I'm sure this is well before your time, but a single card in the library catalog represented an object and described the title, author, and subjects as seen here. So it then can be located and accessed. Another analog example includes many physical objects that we're actually quite familiar with, which are covered in metadata. So for example, the cover of a book. It's covered in metadata, so information about the book. So we have the title here, The Catcher in the Rye. We have the author. We have the publisher. And we also have a short synopsis of what the book is about. So all of this information both helps us distinguish this item from others and also provides essential information about this book to help determine if we want to read it or not. So we've established what metadata is and its origins, but who cares? It's not like we interact with it every day. Well, we actually do. Metadata is integral to our digital life. If you've ever created a hashtag on Instagram or Twitter, you've effectively created a metadata label for your photo or tweet. This then creates a word that can be searched, and all items with that word will be grouped together. This efficiently organizes information on social media platforms and allows you to find content that you wouldn't otherwise through your networks. Another great example is Netflix. So Netflix wouldn't be nearly as intuitive if it wasn't applying metadata to its content and tracking your watching habits. If you've watched a number of British crime movies lately, you may see a suggestion like this. This indicates that you've watched a number of films tagged as British crime movies, and the Netflix algorithm is suggesting that other items with the same tag would also be of interest to you. So you may see where I'm going with this, in that there are ethical implications for metadata and personal privacy online. Through the use of social media and various apps, companies can get access to a large amount of personal metadata, so essentially data about you. You've likely already encountered the results of this, such as targeted advertisement. Have you ever traveled to a new city and suddenly you're receiving advertisements for a company in that location where you've never been before? Or have ads popped up for a pair of jeans you were just looking at on a website? Well, this is possible because while it's illegal for companies to have access to your personal data, so for example, the content of your emails or texts, it is currently legal for companies to use your metadata, so including location, demographic information, and browsing history to target marketing to you. So here we have an example of this type of information that can be turned into targeted advertisement on Instagram. The use of personal metadata is already spurring on conversation about what is and isn't personal data, and governments and the legal system have their work ahead of them in terms of making distinctions to protect the privacy of users in the digital sphere. So to sum up, metadata can provide information about what data is, so the description of the digital object as a whole, as well as key components, how it should look or be presented, and it can also provide information about how it should be preserved. So this is especially true in an archival context. It's important to note that without metadata, we couldn't search for and discover information, but we do need to keep in mind the ethical implications, especially surrounding personal metadata. So on to markup. What is it? If metadata is data about data, markup is how to structure that data so it's machine readable. You can think of metadata as sort of the contents, the actual aboutness of an object, and markup as the package to transport those contents. Do you keep in mind that sometimes people will use the terms metadata and markup synonymously, and this all can get a little confusing. However, the origins of markup are a bit different in that the origins are related to the publishing industry, where editors would physically mark up text before it went to the printer, indicating in the margins how the text should be formatted when printed, so size, font, bold or italic text, etc. The modern digital form of markup is markup languages, such as hypertext markup language or HTML. Here we have an example of how HTML works and can provide structure to a web page. We can see semantic tags here denoting meaning, which is then transferred to our output, or what you as an end user see on the web page. Here we have a tag h1 that indicates that the text between these tags is a header. If you want to play around with HTML, you can do so on your WordPress site. If you're creating a post or page, you'll notice that there are two tabs, one labeled Visual and one labeled Text HTML. This can be a great way to kind of wrap your head around what we see on the visual side and what that looks like with markup. So here we can see that there are different types of markup that are used for different purposes. There's presentational markup, which isn't created manually and is effectively hidden from the author. A great example of this is when you use a word processor like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, and the markup in the back end is saying this is bold when we press Control B. Then there's procedural markup, which provides instructions for programs. This is largely used in the sciences and mathematics when creating complex documents. Then there's descriptive markup, which is what we typically think of when we discuss markup. Markup languages such as HTML and XML fall under this category. Descriptive markup describes or labels parts of a document to provide meaningful structure. For example, in XML, a popular markup language, because it can be extended for many different purposes, by tagging title, the central role here is describing what a part of the document is. So how does this relate to the digital humanities? Well, TH projects typically consist of digital objects, text, photographs, paintings, or historical data, whether they are digitized or physical objects that are scanned or photographed, or if they're born digital, so if they have always been a digital object. All of these objects, as well as the sites that host them, require metadata to describe them, so we know what they are, and also so that they're discoverable, so we can search for and find them. So I have an example here of a digital object in the UNBC digital archives that illustrates this point. While this isn't a digital humanities project per se, this type of rich content could easily be a great foundation for investigating humanities questions as part of a larger project looking at historical populations in Prince George. So this is the Corliss Funeral Ledger, a record of deaths in the Prince George area from 1916 to 1951. This handwritten text has been digitized as well as transferred into a more legible spreadsheet. However, without metadata, we couldn't search for this on the archive's website or through Google. We need more than just simply digitizing this object, as it will essentially be lost in digital oblivion if we have no way to find it. So let's take a look at how metadata was applied to this object. Here on the archive's website, we can see visible metadata, so information about the object that lets us know what the title, contents, age, physical characteristics are, so that we can see if we would want to investigate further, either online or even perhaps looking at it in person. This type of information is super helpful for researchers and wasn't possible before the advent of the internet. But let's also take a look behind the scenes. So this is the XML code, which is actually freely available via a link on this page on the archive's website. Here we can see that there's the metadata standard EAD, which is a specialized set of elements of description that are specifically for archival documents. We can also see that the markup language, extensible markup language, or XML, is used, which is acting as the sort of a wrapper of the metadata, so that the metadata using EED standards can be machine readable. So from here we can see how metadata helps the user by providing information, but what else? Well, a key thing here is discoverability. So when structuring data with metadata, you're providing key terms which can be used to search and find it by others. This means that not only will it be indexed in the archives database, but it can also be found via the open web through a Google search. Here I searched for the Corliss Funeral Ledger in Google, and because the title was included in metadata, we are able to find it as the first result here. So we can see how the application of metadata has greatly increased the visibility of this object and also can greatly increase the visibility of digital humanities objects and projects more generally. So here we are nearing the end of this video. The last thing I will touch on is metadata games, which you will interact with this week. The purpose of metadata games is to crowdsource metadata creation, specifically keyword tags, so that digitized objects held at cultural institutions like libraries and museums can be found. Because these institutions have limited funding, it's near impossible to provide comprehensive metadata for every work that's digitized. Crowdsourcing metadata also has the benefit of having natural language, so meaning that keywords are being developed in the way that most people would search for them rather than what an individual specialist may think it would be classified as. In doing so, this helps anyone who could benefit from discovering this information, so both researchers, maybe in DH or in other fields, or just the general public who might be interested because these objects reside on the open web and aren't behind paywalls. So definitely try out some of the games. I especially like this one, the stupid robot game, where a tiny robot needs to know what is in the photos. So you create metadata keywords so that the robot can learn. In doing so, you are participating in creating metadata for cultural institutions and helping others find them. So that's it for the week. As always, feel free to contact me or set up an appointment. Thanks for watching.